When you first start Adobe Premiere Pro CS6, this is what you're going to see. Or in fact, you're probably not going to see these recent projects because you won't have produced any, but if you have, you're going to have them listed here. You can just click on any of those to go to them. You're going to have the option down here to choose Help. Now, the help for Adobe Premiere Pro is actually brilliant. It's a mixture of the Adobe produced content and some crowdsourced content, tutorials and so on, that are linked to from inside of the help files. They're updated all the time, but you do need to be online to access them. You can download a PDF of the user guide from inside the help files, but you need to be online to see the help files themselves. Open project's pretty obvious. That's going to give you the option to browse to an existing project. What we're interested in, though, is this one, to make a new project. So I'm going to click on this button, and let's take a look down the general settings when you first create a new project file. The file that we're about to create is the one that's going to contain all of the creative decisions that are made. Now, it's important to be clear that when you import video, for example, into a Premiere Pro project, you're not actually moving any media anywhere. What you're doing is creating a shortcut to the original media file. It's very, very important to be clear about this distinction. We're not, for example, bringing a 1 GB file into the Premiere Pro project. We're making a link to this imaginary 1 GB file. It would be impossible and unwieldy if project files actually contained the media they link to. So as a consequence, the files are actually pretty small. They're quite easy to back up and quite easy to transport. All of the options I'm going to show you now can be changed later, so don't worry too much about getting these right. Having said that, it's pretty unlikely you're going to want to change them away from the defaults. First of all, we've got video rendering and playback. And what this refers to is the way Premiere Pro is going to display, in particular, any special effects that you apply to your clips. Is that work going to be done by the CPU, the central processor unit in your computer? That's the IQ, if you like, of the brain of your computer. Or is much of that work going to be conducted by the graphics card? Now, if you have the right graphics card, and in the case of Premiere Pro 6, this means either one of the NVIDIA CUDA-enabled graphics cards you'll find listed on the Adobe website, or an OpenCL supporting graphics card, the likes of which you'll find in the MacBook Pro laptops, or at least some MacBook Pro laptops. If you've got one of those, then it can go through the GPU, the graphics processing unit. And the GPU is brilliant at doing this kind of work. So if you can possibly get the right graphics card into your machine, I really encourage you to do so. It changes the way playback performance works just for long GOP formats like H.264, the kind of media that you'll get, for example, from a DSLR, but also lots of the effects can be performed without waiting around for them to render. That means without waiting around for a file to be created that looks like the results of the effect so that Premiere Pro can play it back. So it makes quite a big difference to have this GPU support. You'll soon know if your graphics card is set up and working properly because this menu will be unavailable if it's not. Next up, we've got the video and audio display formats. In fact, these have got nothing to do with the way video is displayed or the way audio is played back. It's to do with the way time is measured. And the default is going to be timecode. Timecode, or at least for video, timecode is the hours, minutes, seconds, and frames of time passing for your media. This is absolutely an industry standard way of measuring the passage of time for video. Now, depending on your format, the number of frames per second may vary. If you're working with PAL video, it's probably going to be 25 frames per second. If you're working with NTSC, then it's going to be probably 29.97 frames per second or 30 frames per second. Whatever it is, timecode is the way you're probably going to want to see the passage of time. Also, you've got feet and frames for 16mm and 35mm film, and a regular frame count. These options are specifically for cases where you've got telecine film and you're intending to have an original neg cut produced, and the neg cutter needs to have the feet and frames or the frame count number information in order to work out where the cut should be. Frankly, if you're going to work on a feature film edit based on celluloid, do a little bit of research before you decide which of these options you want to take. Speak to the lab and they'll guide you. Now, equally for the audio, we've got the option of either displaying in terms of audio samples or milliseconds, thousandths of a second. Generally speaking, you're going to want audio samples. This is many thousandths of a second each. Classically, you'd have professional audio recorded at 48,000 hertz. That's the 48,000 times per second the audio is sampled. In fact, what actually happens is to accurately record the audio, the samples have to be double the frequency rate, which means that 48 kilohertz audio, which is what you get on DAT recorders, on Nagras, most professional audio recording systems, 48 kilohertz audio will accurately record up to about 24 kilohertz, which is more than human hearing anyway. What this means is if you set your display format to audio samples, you can actually zoom in to an individual sample. If you set this to milliseconds, you can zoom into thousandths of a second. And I must admit, I've never met anybody yet who preferred the thousandths option over the original audio samples option. The capture format is, in this case, specifically if you're working in Firewire only. I'm working on a machine where Premiere Pro is installed just as software. I don't have specific additional dedicated hardware available that would give me additional connections. If you're recording from DigiBeta, you might well have a capture card that gives you an SDI connection, an SD SDI connection, little BNC connector. If you're working with HD cam, you're probably going to use HD SDI, and depending on your hardware, you'll see different options appearing in this menu. So if you're working in software and you're recording from tape, these are your only options with Premiere Pro, DV or HDV. If you're working with additional hardware, not only will you have extra options on this menu for the capture format, you'll have extra options in terms of the codec and, of course, the physical connection. You'll need to check the documentation for your other hardware to find the best settings. But generally what happens is you have Premiere Pro installed, you install that hardware, and it looks for Premiere Pro, and if it finds it, it installs itself to Premiere Pro, giving you additional menu options and settings that relate to that specific hardware. Perhaps you'll have something by AJ or Blackmagic or Matrox or one of the many hardware cards that are compatible with Premiere Pro. The last option on this panel is actually the only one you're likely to ever do anything with, because all the other options are usually fine by default, or you can change them later anyway. We really just need to choose a location for our project file and a name for it. In this case, I'm going to click Browse. I'm going to browse to our Assets folder. I'm going to make an O2, let me see now, Premiere Pro Projects folder. There we are, and I'll call this one General Project Settings. So that's the general settings you'll be working with when you first create a project with Adobe Premiere Pro CS6.